The next day, Salahuddin Ayyubi informed Naji that he could come to the feast any night. Naji organized a feast for 3 days later and mentioned that it would be less of a feast and more of a celebration. He added that the celebration would take place in the desert, away from the city, under the illumination of lanterns. There would be arrangements for music and dance. Bodyguards on horseback would perform stunts. There would be swordsmanship demonstrations and competitions of unarmed combat. Salahuddin Ayyubi would be hosted overnight there, with tents set up for his accommodation. Salahuddin Ayyubi listened to the details of the program and did not object even to the music and dance. Naji hesitantly and cautiously said, "Among the soldiers in the army who are not Muslims or who are not yet Muslims, some occasionally drink alcohol. They are not habitual drinkers, but they seek permission to consume alcohol during the celebration." Salahuddin Ayyubi replied, "You are their commander. If you wish, you may allow them. If you do not wish, I will not impose my orders on you." Naji, in a submissive manner, said, "May the prestige of the Emir of Egypt always remain high. Who am I to permit something you strongly disapprove of?" Salahuddin Ayyubi replied, "Grant them permission as long as everything remains orderly on the night of the celebration, without chaos or trouble. If anyone caused chaos or commotion after drinking alcohol, they would be severely punished." When the news reached Salahuddin Ayyubi's staff that Naji was organizing a celebration in his honor, which would include music, dancing, and alcohol, and that Salahuddin Ayyubi had accepted the invitation despite these frivolities, everyone began looking at one another in astonishment. Someone remarked that Naji was lying and merely trying to assert his influence over others. Another suggested that Naji had managed to enchant even Salahuddin Ayyubi with his schemes. This opinion resonated with those who were Naji's close companions and allies. When Salahuddin Ayyubi had taken charge, he had declared indulgence in luxuries, drinking, and immoral behavior as crimes. He had implemented such strict discipline that no one dared neglect their duties as they had in the past. These individuals were pleased with the idea that the new Emir of Egypt had allowed alcohol and dancing at a celebration. They believed that in a matter of days, he might also indulge in these pleasures himself. Only Ali bin Sufyan knew the reason why Salahuddin Ayyubi had permitted such frivolities. The evening of the celebration arrived. It was a moonlit night, and the moonlight in the desert was so clear that even the grains of sand were visible. Moreover, thousands of lanterns had lit up the desert sands as if it were daytime. A crowd of bodyguards surrounded a vast open field like walls. A grand throne-like seat was placed for Salahuddin Ayyubi, resembling the throne of a great emperor. On either side of it were seats for high-ranking guests. A short distance from the expansive arena, there were exquisitely decorated tents for the guests. Away from these, a large tent was specially set up for Salahuddin Ayyubi to spend the night. Ali bin Sufyan had visited the site before sunset to inspect it. Guards were stationed around the tent. Naji was giving final instructions to Zikoi. That evening, Zikoi's beauty seemed to have enhanced even further. A soft fragrance, with a hint of the city's essence, emanated from her body. Her hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her dark brown hair against her fair shoulders captivated any wandering gaze. Her attire was so delicate that all the contours of her body were clearly visible. A natural smile adorned her lips, resembling a freshly blooming flower. Naji looked at her from head to toe and said, "Perhaps your physical beauty will not affect Salahuddin Ayyubi, so use your words. Do not forget the lessons I have been teaching you all these days. And remember, when you go to him, do not become his servant. Become like the fig blossom that appears atop a tree, but when someone climbs the tree to reach it, it disappears. Bring him to his knees before you. I assure you, you will be able to turn that stone into water." On this very land, Cleopatra melted a man like Caesar with her beauty and youth, letting him flow into the sands of Egypt. Cleopatra was not more beautiful than you. The lessons I've taught you are Cleopatra's strategies. A woman's strategies like these never fail. Zikoi smiled, listening intently. The sands of Egypt had given birth to another Cleopatra, as alluring as a serpent. Egyptian history was about to repeat itself. As the sun set, lanterns were lit. Salahuddin Ayyubi rode his horse, surrounded on all sides by guards who had been specially chosen by Ali bin Sufyan. Out of that group, 10 guards had been stationed around Salahuddin Ayyubi's tent earlier that evening. Musicians played welcoming tunes on their instruments, accompanied by the beat of drums. The desert echoed with chants of "Long live the Emir of Egypt, Salahuddin Ayyubi." Naji stepped forward to welcome him and said, "In the presence of a great protector of Islam like you, we bow our heads in respect and offer you the warmest welcome. Look at the anticipation and devotion of those here. They are ready to lay down their lives at your command." Naji used every flattering word he could think of. As soon as Salahuddin Ayyubi took his seat, the sound of galloping horses could be heard. When the horses came into the light of the lanterns, everyone saw 4 horses from the right and 4 from the left. 4 more horses were galloping in, each carrying a rider. They had no weapons and were charging directly toward each other. It was evident they would collide, but no one knew what their intention was. As the riders got closer, both teams of riders stood on their stirrups, firmly balancing themselves. They held the reins in one hand and spread their other arms wide. The horses charged head-on, and the riders clashed with one another, trying to grab and pull each other off their mounts. When the horses moved past each other, 2 riders fell off their horses and tumbled onto the sand, rolling as they hit the ground. On one side, a rider managed to grab an opponent by one arm, lifted him off his horse, and carried him onto his own horse as he rode away. The crowd created such an uproar that it was impossible to hear anything, even one's own voice. When these riders disappeared into the darkness, another set of 4 horses from each side came forward, and a similar contest took place. In this way, 8 rounds of such matches occurred. Following this, camel riders entered the field, and then horsemen and camel riders demonstrated extraordinary stunts. After that, there were displays of swordsmanship and hand-to-hand combat without weapons. In these events, several soldiers were injured. Salahuddin Ayyubi watched completely absorbed, with admiration for the courage and fearlessness displayed in these demonstrations and competitions. He realized this was precisely the kind of brave army he needed. He leaned toward Ali bin Sufyan and said, "If this army could be imbued with the spirit of Islam, I could use it alone to bring crusaders to their knees." Ali bin Sufyan repeated the same advice he had given earlier, saying, "If Naji is relieved of his command, that spirit can be cultivated." However, Salahuddin Ayyubi, instead of dismissing an intelligent and experienced commander like Naji, preferred to reform him and guide him toward the right path. With these thoughts in mind, he observed the celebrations closely. Salahuddin Ayyubi had come to observe the character of this army. He was disheartened when Naji requested permission for the soldiers and commanders to drink alcohol and enjoy singing and dancing. Salahuddin granted the request only because he wanted to see the extent to which this army was immersed in indulgence. While the army had demonstrated bravery, skilled horsemanship, and remarkable swordsmanship during the demonstrations and contests, their behavior at mealtime revealed a different story. The arrangements for the feast were made in a large open field. On one side, food was prepared for approximately 2,000 soldiers, and a little further away, separate arrangements were made for Salahuddin Ayyubi and other high-ranking guests. Hundreds of roasted lambs, thousands of roasted chickens, and countless other dishes were prepared. Small leather flasks of wine and pitchers were placed before the soldiers. The soldiers pounced on the food and wine, drinking heavily and creating chaos. Fights started breaking out among them. Salahuddin Ayyubi observed the scene silently, without any expression that revealed what he was thinking. He asked Naji only one question. "Out of a force of 50,000 soldiers, how did you select these soldiers for the feast? Are they your worst soldiers?" In a submissive tone, Naji replied, "No, Amir of Egypt. These 2,000 men are my finest soldiers. You have seen their demonstrations of skill and bravery. On the battlefield, their courage will astonish you. Please do not judge them by their unruly behavior. These men would lay down their lives at your command. I occasionally give them complete freedom to enjoy themselves, allowing them to temporarily indulge in the pleasures of this world." Salahuddin Ayyubi did not say anything in response to this reasoning. When Naji turned his attention toward the other guests, Salahuddin Ayyubi said to Ali bin Sufyan, "I have seen what I wanted to see. These Sudanese soldiers are accustomed to drinking and causing chaos. You say they lack passion. I see they lack character as well. If you take this army to the battlefield, instead of fighting, they will be more concerned with saving their own lives, looting wealth, and behaving barbarically with the women of the conquered." Ali bin Sufyan suggested that the soldiers trained by him be merged with Naji's 5,000 Sudanese troops. He believed that bad soldiers, when placed among good ones, often change their habits. Salahuddin smiled and said to Ali bin Sufyan, "You surely know the secrets of my heart. This is exactly what I intended, but did not want to reveal to anyone just yet. Do not mention this to anyone." Ali bin Sufyan had the remarkable ability to uncover the secrets of others' hearts and was exceptionally intelligent. He was about to say something further when their attention was drawn to other matters. Exquisite and priceless carpets were laid out on the ground. The sweet and enchanting melodies of the shehnai and sarangi filled the air, silencing the guests. From one side, a group of dancing girls appeared. 20 girls, dressed in delicate and refined clothing, walked gracefully toward them. Their garments were so fine and sheer that every curve of their bodies was visible. Each outfit was a long, thin robe that flowed from their shoulders to their ankles. Their hair was loose, blending with the silk of their attire, making it appear as if they wore garments made of shimmering threads. The gentle desert breeze and the girls' movements caused their loose robes to sway, making it seem as though flower-laden branches were floating through the air. Each girl's attire was of a different color, and each face was unique, but all shared the same beauty and elegance in the grace of their forms. Their marble-like arms were exposed, adding to their allure. As they approached, it seemed as though their feet did not touch the ground. They moved like waves of the air. The girls stopped in a semicircle, facing Salahuddin Ayyubi, casting an enchanting spell with their beauty and the magic of their presence. At that moment, two dark-skinned Ethiopian men appeared, their waists girded with cheetah skins. They carried a large basket and walked briskly, placing the basket near the semicircle of the girls. The 7 snake charmers began playing their flutes. The Ethiopian men who had brought the basket disappeared like raging bulls, vanishing into the wind. From the basket emerged a large bud, which began to rise and bloom like a flower. From within this flower, a girl's face appeared, and then she slowly rose further. It looked as though the moon was emerging from crimson clouds. This girl did not seem to belong to this world. Her smile appeared otherworldly, not earthly at all. The brilliance of her hair did not resemble the shine typically seen in Egyptian girls. As the girl stepped out of the broad petals of the flower, her grace and the elegance of her movements mesmerized the spectators. Ali bin Sufyan glanced at Salahuddin Ayyubi, who had a smile on his lips. Salahuddin smiled and whispered in his ear, "I did not expect her to be this beautiful." At that moment, Naji approached Salahuddin Ayyubi and said, "May the glory of the Amir of Egypt always shine. This girl's name is Zikoi. I brought her here for you all the way from Alexandria. She is neither a professional dancer nor a courtesan. She dances only out of love for the art, not for any audience or gathering. I know her father. He trades in fish along the coast. This girl is devoted to you and regards you as a prophet. When I happened to visit her house to meet her father, she requested me, saying, 'I have heard that Salahuddin Ayyubi has become the Amir of Egypt. For the love of God, please let me meet him. I have nothing to offer to that great man except my life and my dance, which I place at his feet. Respected Amir, I sought your permission for this dance only because I wanted to present this girl before you.'" Salahuddin Ayyubi responded, "Did you tell her that I do not permit any woman to dance or display herself before me? I cannot bear to see such a sight. These girls, whom you claim to have brought with dignity, are practically naked." Salahuddin Ayyubi said firmly. Embarrassed, Naji replied, "Your Excellency, I had informed them that the Amir of Egypt disapproves of dance. But this girl insisted, saying, 'He will appreciate my dance because it does not invite sin.' This is the dance of a pure-hearted girl. I will present not my body, but my art before Ayyubi. If I were a man, I would have joined his guard to protect his life." Salahuddin Ayyubi asked, "What are you trying to say? Should I call her over and praise her?" Saying so, you perform wonderfully by exposing yourself before thousands of men. Should I commend her for her expertise in igniting men's desires? Naji responded, "No, Amir of Egypt. She has come from afar with only this hope. Just look at her. There is no professional vulgarity in her dance. Instead, there is self-sacrifice. See how she looks at you with such devoted eyes. True, worship is reserved for Allah alone, but through the grace of her movements and her reverent gaze, she is offering her devotion to you. Allow her to enter your tent, even for a brief moment. Think of her as the future mother, whose womb will give birth to brave sons who will protect Islam. She will proudly tell her children, "I had the honor of speaking with Salahuddin Ayyubi in private." With exceptionally compelling words and emotional persuasion, Naji convinced Salahuddin Ayyubi to grant permission. The girl, whom Naji had purchased from a slave trader but claimed to be the virtuous daughter of a respectable father, was sent to Salahuddin Ayyubi's tent. Zikoi, moving her body gracefully, slowly approached the tent. She kept glancing at Salahuddin Ayyubi repeatedly and smiling, while the other girls moved around her like butterflies. This wasn't a frenzied dance. Under the soft glow of the lights, it seemed as if mermaids were swimming in clear, pale blue waters. The moonlight added its own charm to the scene. No one could tell what Salahuddin Ayyubi, sitting silently, was thinking. Even Naji's soldiers, who had been causing chaos under the influence of alcohol, fell silent. A sense of peace enveloped the earth and sky. Naji was overjoyed with his success, and the night wore on. After midnight, Salahuddin Ayyubi entered the luxurious tent that Naji had specially prepared for him. Inside, carpets had been laid out, and the bed was covered with a fabric resembling a cheetah's skin. A chandelier cast a soft blue light, resembling the moonlight over the desert. While the air inside the tent was perfumed, silk curtains adorned the interior. Naji accompanied Salahuddin Ayyubi inside the tent and asked, "Shall I send her in for a little while? I'm terrified of breaking my promise." Salahuddin Ayyubi replied, "Send her in." Naji, as excited as a deer leaping, hurried out of the tent. Not much time had passed when one of Salahuddin Ayyubi's guards saw a dancer approaching the tent. Lamps illuminated the entire area around the tent, a precaution arranged by Ali bin Sufyan to ensure that the surroundings could be well monitored at night. As the dancer came closer, the guards recognized her instantly. They had seen her perform earlier. This was the same girl who had emerged from the basket. It was Zikoi. She was dressed in her dance attire, which was scandalously revealing and provocative. The commander of the guards stopped her. Zikoi explained that she had been summoned by Salahuddin Ayyubi, the Amir of Egypt. The commander replied, "The Amir you are speaking of is not one of those nobles who spend nights with women like you." Zikoi replied, "You can ask him yourself. I wouldn't dare come uninvited." The commander questioned, "How did you receive his summons?" Zikoi said, "Salar Naji told me that the Amir of Egypt has called for me. If you insist, I will leave. But if the Amir questions it, you can deal with the consequences." The commander couldn't believe that Salahuddin Ayyubi had summoned a dancer to his private quarters. He was well aware of Ayyubi's character and his standing order that anyone associated with dancers or singers would be punished with 100 lashes. The commander hesitated, torn between his disbelief and his duty. After much deliberation, he finally gathered the courage to enter Salahuddin Ayyubi's tent. Inside, Ayyubi was pacing. Nervously, the commander said, "There's a dancer outside. She claims that Your Excellency has summoned her." Salahuddin Ayyubi calmly replied, "Let her in." The commander left and allowed Zikoi to enter the tent. The guards outside expected their Amir, the great commander, to immediately throw the girl out. They were bracing themselves to hear his thunderous reprimand, but no such sound came. As the night wore on, faint voices of conversation could be heard from inside the tent. The commander of the guards, restless and uneasy, began pacing back and forth. One of the guards remarked sarcastically, "So, the order to avoid inappropriate relationships applies only to us?" The commander replied, "Yes. The rules are for subordinates, and the law is for the common people." The guard added, "The Amir of Egypt can't be punished with lashes." Frustrated, the commander retorted, "Kings have no morals. Salahuddin Ayyubi probably drinks as well. We are made to live under the illusion of their false piety." In their eyes, the idealized image of Salahuddin Ayyubi began to crumble. The idol of a just and moral leader was replaced by the image of an ordinary Arabian prince. The indulgent and sinful man, hidden behind the veil of piety, was reveling in his guilt. Naji was very pleased, and due to this happiness, he had not even smelled the sweet scent of wine. He sat in his tent, joyfully swaying. In front of him sat his deputy. Orvush said to him, "It seems like our arrow has struck the heart of Salahuddin Ayyubi." Naji replied, "You are right. If our arrow had failed, it would have immediately returned to us. I gave her lessons that she must have never even dreamed of. Now, Salahuddin Ayyubi is no longer the same. He's no longer the idol he once was." Suddenly, Naji heard footsteps from outside. He rushed out, but there was no one. A soldier was walking by. Naji looked towards Salahuddin Ayyubi's tent in the distance. The curtains were drawn and guards stood outside. He entered and told Orvush, "Now I can confidently say that my Zikoi has shattered the idol."